Ryan Mountcastle might just be the most hated man in Canada because he has done it to the Blue Jays again. Two homers on Tuesday night, leading the O's blowout victory over the Blue Jays. And I'll recap it coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Wednesday, June 5th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to take a look at the Orioles' blowout victory over the Blue Jays on Tuesday night, winning it 10-1 in that one to take the first two games of the series. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from that one, including Ryan Mountcastle tormenting the Blue Jays again. Connor Norby's first hit is a home run, and Corbin Burnes just dominating for 7 strong innings. Then we'll get to the most somber Orioles news we've gotten in the last couple of weeks or so, and that was the injury news that was dropped over the weekend for Tyler Wells and John Means. Both will be needing season-ending elbow surgery. So we'll talk about the impact on the Orioles for this year and the impact on both of those pitchers in their careers in the future. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. So we begin with another Orioles victory. Final score north of the border on Tuesday night in game 2 of a 4-game set. The Orioles 10 and the Toronto Blue Jays 1 as the O's have taken the first 2 games of this series. Orioles with the victory are now 39-20. That is a season high 19 games over 500. Unfortunately, the Yankees are playing the Twins and the Yankees beat the Twins on Tuesday. So the O's stay, I believe, 2.5 back of New York, but the O's just continuing to play some fantastic baseball since being swept by the Cardinals and ending the sweepless streak. The Orioles are just, a ho-hum 10-2 in the last 12 games since then. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' 10-1 win over the Blue Jays. And the first thing you need to know is Ryan Mountcastle just can't stop hitting against the Toronto Blue Jays. He might want to watch himself. When the Orioles travel back to Toronto later this year, they might not let him into the country for the crimes he has committed against Blue Jays fans in his career. And it certainly continued on Tuesday night. Mountcastle with a 2-for-5 with 2 home runs in this game for the Oriole first baseman. It started with a 3-run homer in the 3rd inning off of what was at that point the follower bulk guy, Bowden Francis. He had come out of the bullpen. The Blue Jays kind of did a bullpen day on Tuesday. The first batter he faced was Ryan Mountcastle. It didn't go well. Now, Mountcastle didn't barrel up this ball. 92.9 miles per hour off the bat, just 350 feet, but it's a 3-run homer that counts the same, just sneaking over the wall down the left field line to put the Orioles up 4-0 in the 3rd. And then he did it again in the 5th. And this one in the 5th inning, well, he got all of it off of Francis again. A 2-run shot, 108 off the bat, 443 feet to dead center field that gave the Orioles a 7-0 lead at the time. It went into like the upper terrace, upper deck in dead straightaway center field in the kind of newly revamped Rogers Center. That was a laser out to center for Mountcastle, who came in to this game with a 962 career OPS in 55 games against the Blue Jays. That's going to go up after what he did Tuesday night. He now has 17 home runs in 56 career games against Toronto. If you pace that over a full season, that is a 50 homer pace in a season that he is on just against the Blue Jays. This dude mashes Toronto. He does it every time. And it kind of gets funnier every time he does it, to be honest, especially with the Blue Jays really struggling at the moment. Second thing you need to know from Tuesday's win for the O's is that quietly, Adley Rutschman also loves playing the Blue Jays. And if you look at the stats, And now Mountcastle's played 20 plus more games in his career against the Jays. But if you just look at the stats per game, Adley has actually been better against Toronto in his career than Mountcastle has. Adley hit his first home run at Rogers Center a couple of years ago. Adley Rutschman came into Tuesday's game with a 1020 OPS in 33 career games against the Blue Jays. That's 60 points higher than what Mountcastle had, and Rutschman had a nice day on Tuesday as well. A couple of RBI singles in this one. Andrew a walk, 2 for 4, now hitting 305 on the season with an 812 OPS. Had an RBI single to get the scoring started in the third inning against Yenesis Cabrera, and then he added one more in the fifth. Both of those RBI singles came right before the 2 Mountcastle home runs. The Orioles really kind of poured it on at different times in this game with a 4-run third and a 3-run fifth, thanks to Mountcastle and thanks to Rutschman, who just continues to hit and hit and hit this season. Third thing you need to know from the O's win over the Blue Jays on Tuesday is that Connor Newcomb picked up his first career hit in his second big league game, and it just so happened to be a home run. After Newcomb went 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts and a flyout on Monday night in his major league debut, he got the start again on Tuesday, playing second base and hitting 8th for the Orioles. And I thought he had 3 good-looking at-bats to start the game. He was 0 for 3 with 3 fly ball outs, but I thought he was putting good swings on the baseball. And then he got rewarded. Against the hard-throwing Nate Pearson in the top of the 8th inning, Newcomb gets a hanging breaking ball and laces it just over the wall in left field for his first career hit. Ends up being a 2-run homer, 98 off the bat, 370 feet for a moment. Connor Newcomb will never forget. I thought he was looking pretty confident in those first 6 at-bats, and in the 7th one, he is rewarded. Luckily, the baseball, and Jeff Arnold and Brad Brock talked about this on the broadcast. Luckily, the baseball wound up in the Blue Jays bullpen, so he doesn't have to negotiate with a fan. They set it aside. Newcomb will get it. Awesome, awesome, awesome moment for him. And just another Orioles prospect who comes up and is hitting at the big league level. Just a side note, I mentioned Jeff Arnold and Brad Brock. I'm getting a lot of questions about where's Kevin Brown? Where's Ben McDonald? Every single year, Kevin Brown calls the Women's College World Series. The Women's College World Series is wrapping up this week. The championship series starts tonight. It is Oklahoma against Texas. Oklahoma looking for a 4-peat. Kevin Brown will probably be back with the Orioles, I would guess, at the latest when they return home to play the Braves next week. Ben McDonald calls the men's college baseball tournament. He was calling regionals last weekend. He'll be calling super regionals this weekend. He'll probably be in Omaha next week. So he'll be out for most of June as well. They will be back. Nobody's sick. Nobody got fired. Nobody got suspended again. They do this every single year, and they're doing it again. It's cool gigs for both of them to get. They will be back later on, probably this month, for Jim and Ben and Kevin as well. Fourth thing you need to know from the Orioles' 10-1 win Tuesday is that probably got overshadowed because the Orioles were smacking homers and the offense was so good. They scored 10 runs in this game on 9 hits, and they were getting on base. They drew 4 walks. But Corbin Burnes was sensational once again. 7 innings of 1-run ball for Burnes, allowing 4 hits, striking out 5 with 1 walk and 1 home run allowed. 99 pitches for Burnes to get through 7. Listen, just what a trade by the Orioles. Now a 2.26 ERA on the season for Corbin Burnes. He allowed just 2 hard hit balls, 2 of them in the entire game. One of them was the second to last batter that he faced in this one. He got 2 outs in the 6th. The O's are up 8-0, and he was doing a good job. Listen, the Orioles gave him, after the big 5th inning, they were up 7-0 heading into the bottom of the 5th. He just went into complete attack mode starting in the 5th because he was like, I'm Corbin Burnes. I'm not giving up 7 runs. Even if I throw all strikes, my stuff will play. Let me just go at him. And that's what he did. And he had 2 outs in the 6th, and he was ready to finish 7 scoreless. And George Springer got him for kind of a laser shot solo home run to break up the shutout. But otherwise, he got the next batter, Varsho, to fly out to finish off 7 innings. They just didn't hit him hard at all in this game. They got the Springer home run, and then you got to go all the way back to the first inning. A Vladdy ground out for the final out of the first was hit 98 miles an hour off the bat. The only other hard hit ball against Burnes. And that's the thing with him. He only had 5 strikeouts. It's a solid day in 7 innings, but you're used to a little more than that from Corbin Burnes. He only had 7 swings and misses the entire night. You're used to way more than that from Burnes. But here's the thing. That was probably the best his cutter has been all season. And by StatCast run value, Burnes has had the best cutter in Major League Baseball this year. And that was the best we've seen it in 2024. Cutter was sitting 96, usually sits 95. He touched 98 and 99 a couple of times with the cutter. That's unfair. And you add it to the fact that his cutter, which was, as usual, his number one most used pitch. I mean, he just poured in the cutters on Tuesday night when it's working, 44 of his 99 pitches, 70% in zone rate. 70% of his cutters, he was throwing them 96, 97, were also in the strike zone. Blue Jays had no chance. It was just a lot of soft contact, a lot of foul balls. And that's fine for Corbin Burnes too. Like, yeah, it's awesome when he racks up 9, 10, 11, 12 strikeouts. Like, that's the dominant Burnes. But he can also dominate you like this, where he's very efficient through 7 innings. He gets a lot of soft grounders and pop-ups on that amazing cutter, and you just can't do anything with it. He's done that before with the Brewers. He'll continue to do it with the Orioles. He can beat you in different ways. He was even throwing backdoor changeups, a couple of strikeouts on backdoor changeups. Man was just locked in. It's better and better every time he goes out there for the O's. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 10-1 win over the Blue Jays Tuesday night in Game 2 of this series in Toronto is that the bullpen had an easy day and just finished off the job for the Orioles. Penn came in, O's up 10-1, bottom of the 8th. They go to Jacob Webb in the 8th. I don't love going to Jacob Webb in a 9-run game. He's not your highest leverage reliever, but he's been a leverage guy, so you'd like to save him. You only have one off day in June, but Jacob Webb kind of has the most rubber arm in the bullpen, and he hadn't pitched since he completely saved the pen going 2 1/3 back on Saturday. So I don't love Jacob Webb in a blowout overall, but when you can throw a 1, 2, 3, 8th inning and throw just 7 pitches to get through the 8th, I'm totally fine with that because he's still plenty available for tomorrow. Doesn't even break a sweat throwing 7 pitches. And then they go to Nick Vespi, who I thought they might go to Vespi for the final 2 innings. He's done that a lot in the minor leagues this year. But hey, he still closed it out, did allow a single, but got a 0 in the 9th. And Webb threw 7 pitches. Vespi threw 12 pitches, which means both of them are going to be available here on Wednesday if the O's need them, which means even in this tough stretch, they'll have a full bullpen available behind Albert Suarez, who's been good, but hasn't necessarily pitched super deep into games. Just kind of a perfect night of baseball for the Orioles in Toronto on Tuesday night. They take Game 2 of the series, which means, with it being a 4-game set, they have clinched the fact that they will not lose this series. At worst, they will split it in 4 games. And what that means is this is now 20 consecutive series for the Orioles against the AL East in which they have not lost the series. So in the last 20 series against AL East opponents for the Orioles, they have won 14 of the series. They have split 5 of the series. And then there's this one, which they'll at the very least split. You would hope they'll get one of the next 2 and win this series as well. To me, that streak is even more impressive than the sweepless streak because those series against the AL East are more important and you're actually winning the series, not just avoiding a sweep. This O's team, there's cool stats all around for the Orioles as they win again on Tuesday. But Corbin Burnes was great. He's going to continue to lead this rotation all year. And unfortunately, we did get news on Friday that the O's rotation is going to have less reinforcements later in the year. John Means and Tyler Wells both officially out for the season. What does it mean for them and their careers? We'll start with the blow to John Means coming up right after this. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Game Time. You want to get tickets? Game Time is the place. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app, well, they actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. What I love about the Game Time app is that you can just buy tickets on the app. You get a last-minute deal. You save a bunch of money. You can just buy the ticket right outside of Camden Yards. It downloads right to the app on your phone, and you scan it right on the Game Time app and go into the stadium. I've done it plenty of times. Listen, you get your ticket, you get the seat you want, you get it for a low price. It's the best. Those last-minute deals I talked about, you can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for all the events you want to go to, including the Orioles. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On MLB. That is LOCKEDON MLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So the good news of the weekend, the Orioles continuing to win, won a series over the weekend against the Rays, have taken the first two against the Blue Jays. The bad news was what the Orioles heard on the pitching front. And let's begin with John Means. Mike Elias spoke to the media before Friday night's game against Tampa Bay and delivered some bad news on a couple of Orioles pitchers. And the first was John Means. As Elias said, Means would need to undergo another elbow surgery and would be out for the rest of the season. Just a pivotal blow to Means, to the Orioles. Really, really tough news to take. Now, Means, who we know had kind of a delayed start to this year after the injury last year, he comes back and he's pitching in the game in St. Louis a couple of weeks ago, and something was off. Like, he was still getting outs. He threw 3 scoreless innings, but his fastball was down to 98. And John Means doesn't throw hard, but he's generally sitting 91 to 92. When he's throwing 88 miles an hour on your fastball, that is a problem. He came out after 3 innings. There was a rain delay, but the Orioles said he was going to come out either way. And he went back on the injured list with some forearm tightness, with some elbow issues. He got some tests done. He went for a second opinion, and apparently both of those opinions said, you need elbow surgery again. So Elias announced on Friday that it would be some sort of UCL surgery. UCL is the ulnar collateral ligament. That is the ligament that when it tears, you need Tommy John surgery. They said he needs some kind of UCL surgery, but they didn't know exactly what the surgery would be until they actually opened up the elbow and looked inside it for the surgery. So there was a case where it could have been the internal brace surgery, kind of a newer procedure where you more so repair the ligament, and the recovery time is more like 10 to 12 months instead of 12 to 18 months. Well, unfortunately for Means, it was the worst case, and it was Tommy John. The Orioles announced on Monday that Means did undergo successful Tommy John surgery, which is a good thing, and it was good that he got it done quickly. The bad news is they went in Monday and found that he did need another Tommy John just a little over 2 years after he got his last Tommy John surgery back in May of 2022. And that's not great. Basically, 2 surgeries in about 26 months, 2 Tommy Johns is not what you want to see. Now, I do want to give just a huge shout out to John Rogel, who has this amazing public Tommy John surgery database. And I went into that database to check it out and do some research for this episode, because I'm worried about John Means, and we'll talk a little bit about his Orioles future, but just his general baseball future. Like, have guys gotten 2 Tommy John surgeries this close together a lot of the time? Well, there are 154 players in John's database, professional players, who have had 2 different Tommy John surgeries in their careers. 116 of those 154 have returned to pitch professionally in some sense. So the rate of at least returning to the field, although not 100%, is pretty solid. So that's one step of good news for John Means. However, when you break it down, not just to return to the mound, but return to the mound and actually been like effective and pitched multiple more seasons, that is where the rate goes way, way down. I took a look at guys who got their 2 Tommy John surgeries with as little time between it as Means had. So guys with either 1 or 2 years between their multiple Tommy John surgeries. And this is where it's tough. I only found 4 pitchers on that list of guys who had it either 1 or 2 years apart who actually returned to be effective major league pitchers. The first one is Cole Reagans, who got Tommy John twice in the minors, and then, of course, was traded to the Royals and had become the Royals ace. He was 21 years old when he got his second Tommy John surgery. Daniel Hudson, who is still kicking as a reliever, veteran guy, 37 years old with the Dodgers. He got 2 Tommy Johns very, very early in his career. He had other injuries after that, but he is now 37 and is still a high leverage reliever in the majors. So that's been a pretty good success story. Drew Rasmussen had 2 Tommy Johns in the minor leagues. He was 21 when he got his second one. He is now injured again with a different injury. He's had a lot of injuries in his career. And the last one is Jose Soriano, who had his second Tommy John surgery at 22 a couple of years ago. He just returned with the Angels and is pitching really well for the Angels in their rotation. Now, I wouldn't say it's been a long track record of him pitching well, but he has been really good this year. So I at least put him on this list. Now, the one thing you want to notice is these guys are really, really young when they're getting their second Tommy Johns. I mean, the oldest by far on this list was Daniel Hudson, who got it at 26. John Means got his second Tommy John on Monday at age 31. Like in general, 7, 8+ years older than these other guys who had success after a second Tommy John. It's a lot of things working against John Means. And I have full confidence he will return to a big league mound with somebody at some point in 2025 or 2026 coming back from this second surgery. But I worry about how effective he'll be and what kind of big league career he'll really have once he does come back and he's 32, 33 years old at that point. Now, the good thing for Means is the kind of pitcher he is, more of a finesse guy, command guy. He's somebody who could much easier pitch into his late 30s because of the pitcher he already is now. I think that does extend his career, but you still worry about the 2 Tommy Johns. And again, he was good this year in his 4 starts, but it was only 4 starts. He was good at the end of last year in 4 starts, but it was only 4 starts. And he only made 2 starts early in 2022 before he got injured and got the surgery. And if you kind of look at his timeline, like he's out for all of 2024. He is going to miss a good chunk of next year of the 2025 season. And if you remember, Means got his first TJ in May of 22, didn't return to the big league mound until September of 23. Now, some of that is because he also had a back muscle strain that kept him out for like another month or 2 while he was rehabbing. But you're looking at best, he's back after the All-Star break next year. And more than likely, you're looking at an August or September return of 2025. So if he has even one setback, Means isn't back on a big league mound until the opening day of 2026. That's basically 5 years after the last time he was like fully healthy and pitching a big league season. That is a lot of time to go between being fully healthy, and it's tough. And obviously, the worst part here for Means after this whole saga, right? He gets Tommy John, May of 2022, finally comes back last year, makes 4 starts, then feels soreness again. The Orioles get some testing. They shut him down. He doesn't pitch in the playoffs. He was going to start one of those 3 ALDS games. Maybe the fate for the Orioles would have been different had he started. Then they slow him down with his progression this offseason. They have him miss the first month to build up later. He finally comes back. He threw one of the best starts of his career, that first start off the injury list this year against Cincinnati. He was looking good, and then he just has to leave the game against St. Louis, and he's injured again. It's been a tough stretch for Means, and the worst part is he is a free agent after this season. So there is a chance he has thrown his final pitch in an Orioles uniform. Now, I would love for the O's to work out some sort of 2-year incentive-ridden extension for John Means, where they can have him on the roster as he rehabs his Tommy John next year. He'll be on the roster through the end of this year, rehabbing his Tommy John, but they can do it next year. Maybe he returns in August of 2025. And then the contract is maybe, 2 years, $4 million, but there's escalators where it goes to 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 million. The more and more innings he pitches, especially if he comes back fully healthy in 2026. That's probably the kind of deal he's going to be looking for from any team. And I hope the Orioles give it to him. I would love for the O's to give it to him. But I can tell you from some insight on the situation, talking to some people, it doesn't seem like a great chance. Even if he didn't get injured again, it didn't seem like there was a lot of interest there between either side to bring Means back after this year. And now that he's getting another Tommy John, I mean, it's not out of the question, but it seems very unlikely that the Orioles would do that and bring back John Means in any capacity. And at this point, I hope he gets a chance to pitch elsewhere in the big leagues. I really do hope that. But if I had to guess, and this is unfortunate, we have seen John Means throw his final pitch in an Orioles uniform. That would be my guess right now. I hope I'm wrong, but that would be my guess. And I'm sad. I'm heartbroken. We got the news Friday. I'm not over this at this point. John Means has meant so much to me as an Orioles fan. He's meant so much to Baltimore, to the Orioles community. I mean, 73 career starts since being called up in 2019, 400 innings, a 3.68 ERA. He was the Orioles' lone all-star in 2019, finished 3rd in AL Rookie of the Year voting when he burst onto the scene, throws the no-hitter in Seattle in 2021. And then it was just all the injuries. And you just feel like Means just deserves to start a playoff game for the Orioles. And it's not going to happen, I don't think. That last year was the chance. Maybe he could have tried to pitch through it. There seemed to be, it wasn't like a crazy major injury again, but that's between Means and the Orioles doctors. And I'm heartbroken for John Means. I'm heartbroken for the Means family that have been a big part of this Orioles community as well. He's done so much for the city when he's been around here. He's been the consummate professional as an Oriole, and he basically got hurt right when the O's started getting good in early 2022. And although he's made 8 starts since then, he still hasn't been able to fully settle back in and be a part of this really, really good Orioles teams we've seen over the past 2 years. And it stinks. It stinks for him. It stinks for the Orioles. It stinks for the fans. It's a heartbreaking situation. And just for John Means, I hope the recovery goes well, the surgery goes well. And if it's not with the Orioles, he can return to a big league mound and be effective, at least for another team, because he deserves that after just what he's been through. But if that is it for him in an Oriole uniform, just awesome career. I hope that, as he's rehabbing, he can, be with the team some in the dugout throughout this year. Maybe the O's can go win a World Series for him. He can still get a ring, be with the team. That would be a great way to end it if this is the end for John Means in Baltimore. But man, what a tough way for it to end. Now, he was not the only pitcher who found out this week that he would need another elbow surgery. The other guy was Tyler Wells, and it doesn't end Tyler Wells' time in Baltimore because he's still got a few more years before he's a free agent, but it does affect the Orioles season in 2024 a little bit more, and of course affects Tyler Wells, and we'll get to that impact to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. Now, we're all excited that we're in the swing of things in the baseball season, but we still got some great action elsewhere because it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. For me, with the NBA Finals starting this week, I think the Celtics are probably the better team and going to win, but I cannot cheer for anything Boston related, so I'm taking the Mavericks to win it in the NBA Finals. You can do so too if you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. At FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So it wasn't just John Means who this week got the news that he would need elbow surgery. It was Tyler Wells as well. And Wells, who has been out for a little bit longer, Elias also announcing in his press conference Friday that Tyler Wells would undergo season-ending elbow surgery. Now, Tyler Wells began the year in the rotation because Kyle Bradish and John Means were out to start the year, made 3 starts. They weren't very good, had almost a 6 ERA, and then went on the injured list on April 16th with right elbow inflammation. And that is where he has been since then. The updates over the last few weeks for Tyler Wells were he was down in Sarasota. He was cleared to play catch, but there was no plan for a throwing program. Like everything that was reported and that Brandon Hyde said to the media made you feel like this could be a long-term injury for Tyler Wells. Well, that's what it was. Mike Elias announced a similar thing for Wells. He would need UCL surgery. Again, it seemed like the similar. We don't know if it'll be Tommy John or internal brace until we actually do the surgery and open him up. Now, the Orioles announced Means had the surgery Monday. As far as we know, at least that we've heard, Tyler Wells has not had that surgery yet. And the hope would be for the internal brace, because again, the recovery is shorter, more like 10 to 12 months. But either way, Tyler Wells is also out for the remainder of the 2024 season. Now, for John Means, we obviously wanted more innings this year, and you wanted to see him pitch more, and he could be a weapon, but I was still kind of worried about Means' elbow this year. And it was like, I wouldn't say that any innings you got from Means were a cherry on top, but it felt like I'm not expecting big things and a lot of innings from John Means this year. But for Tyler Wells, at the very least, we were expecting him to be a lockdown late inning reliever at some point. Like he would start early in the year, the O's rotation would get healthy, and then Wells would come back at some point this year and be as good as he was out of the bullpen in 2021, or as good as he was out of the bullpen down the stretch last year when he was basically at the end of the year, the fill-in closer for Felix Bautista as the O's went to the playoffs. Like the O's could have had that at the back end of their bullpen, and that's the one place on the team they need a little help right now is in relief, and Wells could have provided that, but unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. And in terms of, hurting the Orioles, that's one less reliever they're going to have, and even more reason to go out and get a lockdown reliever at the trade deadline this year. I'm not sure the Means and Wells injury means they absolutely have to go get a starter. Like as long as Dean Kramer comes back healthy at some point here in June, you have Cade Povich, you have Chase McDermott, you have even guys like Tucker Davidson at AAA Norfolk and Bruce Zimmerman. Obviously, Albert Suarez has been good depth. I still think the O's, this will push them further towards acquiring a starter at the deadline. But I think the Wells thing with the bullpen is more of the issue. Like they even more so need a reliever or two when it gets to the starting rotation. The Orioles also brought in a little more depth starting wise on Tuesday, re-signing the veteran Julio Teheran to a minor league deal to provide some depth. We'll get into that a little more on tomorrow's episode, but this is still a blow. Even though Wells and Means were on the injured list and weren't pitching for the team when we got the news, it's still a blow to know, hey, you won't have either of them for the rest of the season. And for Tyler Wells, it's going to hurt him long-term as well. Like, this is also, if he gets Tommy John, going to be his second Tommy John surgery. And even if he doesn't, it's going to be his second UCL surgery in general. He had Tommy John back in May of 2019 when he was in high A with the Minnesota Twins system. And that was pretty much the reason why the Orioles were able to get Wells in the 2020 Rule 5 draft. He was unprotected because he was still recovering from the Tommy John, and the O's took a chance, and it worked out, which is great for them and great for Tyler Wells. Now, he's obviously not in the same spot as Means because he's under control for a while. He's not a free agent until after the 2027 season. So even if Wells somehow misses all of this year and all of next year, he would still have 2 more years in an Oriole uniform, 26 and 27, before he became a free agent. Now, he's definitely going to miss a chunk of 2025. Even if he gets the shorter recovery internal brace surgery, it's still 10 to 12 months. You're still missing the first part of next season. But I think the hope is right now that in the second half of 2025, the Orioles could have Tyler Wells back. Now, what I would be interested in is relievers always come back quicker than the starters do because they have less of length to build up to, right? You don't have to build yourself up to be able to throw 6-7 innings after the Tommy John. You basically have to build yourself up to be able to throw, 2 innings max, right? 30 pitches max at a time. So if the Orioles build him up to just be a reliever, maybe he could be back in, June, July of next year. But if they still want him to be a starter, which is possible, and we've seen him had success as a starter in an Oriole uniform, I personally think even before this surgery, long-term, he was going to be a reliever. And now after the surgery, I think that even more so with Wells getting a second Tommy John. Luckily, they are 5 years apart. The rate of success is a little higher than for guys with 1 or 2 years apart, like I talked about earlier. But it'll be interesting to see if they build him up as a starter. If they do, maybe we're looking at more like August or September of next year, whereas if it is a relief thing, it could be earlier. It all depends on what exactly the surgery is and when it gets done and what the Orioles learn from that. But again, just 2 big blows to Means and Wells. Won't have them again this year, and maybe we'll never see Means pitch in an Orioles uniform again, but wishing them both the best in their recoveries. And again, hopefully they get to still be with the team some, be in the dugout as the Orioles try to make a run at getting a ring here in 2024. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. Of course, got to make another announcement for the giveaway we are doing on the podcast this week in celebration of reaching over 7,000 subscribers on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. That is all thanks to you all. We are doing a giveaway, and the giveaway is for the Great 8 t-shirt designed by my buddy Chris, who has been in the comments kind of talking about the shirt design as well. You can see it on the front here with the 8 in the Maryland flag if you're watching on YouTube. And then on the back, it's got the 3 Great 8s, Alex Ovechkin, Lamar Jackson, and Cal Ripken Jr. Now, we won't be giving away the t-shirt of it. We'll actually be giving away the hoodie, which you could argue is even better. And there's 2 things you got to do to enter to win the Great 8s hoodie. Number 1, subscribe to the Locked On Orioles podcast on YouTube. And number 2, leave a comment on either today's YouTube episode or any of the YouTube episodes this entire week. And basically just give me feedback on the podcast. It can be positive, negative, neutral, whatever your thoughts are on the pod. I want to hear them. I want to make this show better. And that comes with me listening to you all, the people that support this show and have done it for a long, long time. So just A, subscribe to the pod on YouTube. B, leave your feedback in the YouTube comments. It'll be open for all 5 episodes this week. I will stop accepting comments at midnight on Friday. I'll pick the winner this weekend. And then coming up on Monday's episode, I will announce the winner of the Great 8s t-shirt. And if you don't win, the Great 8s hoodie, that is okay. If you do not win, you can still get this t-shirt or get this hoodie or get other merch with these Great 8s logos if you go over to route1apparel.com, and you can buy one for yourself as well. But make sure to get those entries in the comment section. I will be back tomorrow for a Thursday episode. Of course, we will be recapping Game 3 between the Orioles and the Blue Jays. It'll be Albert Suarez taking the mound for the O's, and on the other side, Jose Barrios, who has had a fantastic year, will get the ball for the Blue Jays as the Orioles go for a series win. I'll be back tomorrow to recap it and talk about the Orioles bringing back Julio Teheran on a minor league deal and the chances that he could pitch for the O's at some point this season. But that's coming up on tomorrow's episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.